Alright, hello everybody. I honestly don't remember the last time I made a YouTube video was, but it is June 30th. I think the last upload I had was in 2021, but I've been busy with work and my education. But I'm back at it again, y'all. I'm gonna start a new series. I'm actually going to make a proper beginner series, given that all my current videos are very mixed between advanced slash beginner, advanced and beginner. And they're not really catered towards any specific group of people or skill level. With that being said, I think I should just get started. Okay, so Lua, it's a programming language. I would say if you're familiar with other programming languages, Lua is unlike any other language you'll ever learn. It has I will admit it does have a similar syntax to Python, apart from the object-oriented aspect of it, or the part of it that uses objects. By the way, that uh, paradigm is called object-oriented programming. Lua has an OOP or object-oriented paradigm, but it's not quite as versatile as other languages like C Sharp, Java, C++, Python, JavaScript, etc. Uh, for the sake of this beginner series, I will keep everything procedural and functional because those paradigms are the easiest to understand for beginners. But without further ado, let's figure out how this language works. Um, okay, so first things first, I am going to pull up some keywords. And yes, I do reference the API, even though I've been doing this for 8 to 9 years. It's been a while, but I still reference this. Keywords are essentially just reserved names, which you can think of them as ways to define a sentence or a statement in Lua. In other words, these keywords or these key names, which are reserved by Lua, give our code certain functionality or logic. Some keywords control logical flow or do conditional statements. Other ones do loops, and others do functions. Some can return, some can break out of things, some can, uh, you know, continue or skip a loop. It really doesn't matter, but all of these keywords have specific purposes and tasks in Lua. For, but you'll also notice if you know Lua or you know any other programming language, for instance C Sharp, the reserved keywords are data types. Lua, the only reserved data type that Lua has, or the data type is just essentially a type of data that is held by a variable. A variable is just an assignment that we assign to a data type. A data type can be a number, a string, or whatever. I will get into that later in this video. The only keyword which is reserved for a specific data type is nil. Other languages, for instance C Sharp, I do also have the C Sharp documentation pulled up. I referenced that too. Boolean, byte, these are data types. Booleans are true or false. Bytes are essentially one, it's a small number, 0 to 255. An integer, this is an integral numeric type. We have a double, which is a decimal point number. We could also have a float or a, um, we're forgetting one. Null, here it is. Here's null. So the null is essentially what nil is in Lua. Same exact concept, it just means nothing. That's the reserved keyword. C Sharp, we notice, has a bunch of data types. Boolean, byte, char, double, decimal, uh, enum could be considered one. We have a short, we have a long, we have int. It has a bunch of float here, false, etc. These are all data types. However, Lua's reserved data type keyword is nil. Now, back to the idea of using these keywords to actually do things. You know how in English we can use certain words to formulate a sentence. For instance, if I pull up sentence structure, we have I kick the ball. We have the person or the the object which is doing the action. So in this case, it's me. We have kicked. We have an action. The person, I, kicked the action. What did I kick? I kicked the ball, right? That's English. The keywords here are we have the person, place, or thing, I. We have the action, which is going to be our action, or what is going to be inflicted on. Then we have our person, place, or thing, which is our ball. So that is sentence structure. The same thing applies to keywords. For a for loop, we have for. That for will combine with in and also do. Then we would end that with an end statement. For instance, if I was to pull up LUA, that is not what I meant to click. If I pull up LUA, we have for, in, do, end, right? Now we notice we can't just do that because we actually have to define the fillers for this. Just like in English, we have to have I kicked the ball. It's not I kicked ball, right? We have to define the fillers for this for loop. In this case, we have index, which we're going to use static typing because I prefer static typing. Static typing is the idea that we define what a value is going to be before runtime. You just in Lua, it's very similar to. Actually, no, it's not similar to anything. You can compare it to Python if you're interested in that language. Here's my Python IDE. You can actually define a function and define a return type and make it static. You can do that by doing this, followed by what's the word for this? Oh, I forgot the word. But the data type, and then we can just return one, and then we have our return type, right? In Lua, we would use a colon, not the arrow, minus sign arrow. So in this case, we have index number here. Then we'd have our value, which is going to be, in this case, I want it to actually be an integer. So it would be a number. There's no integer values in Lua. It's all defined as a data type number. Then we would do in. Since we're using a loop, we actually have to use a data type called array. I will define what an array is, but we're just going to do for. This will print out this will loop through this table here. So for instance, we have index for, we have our keyword for, we have our fillers here. This is like adding the, I kicked the ball, right? But instead of doing the, it's index and value. And we have another keyword, which is, you can think of that as a noun or pronoun, whatever you want to call it, and an adjective. It could be any filler word in a sentence, followed by it's our structure of the sentence to make it an actual sentence. It's not a filler word. It's whatever the structure of that sentence is, followed by our filler. So this could be the, we, and, but, etc. All those filler words. This is what that is, followed by another keyword or a structural word. And then we have our code block here, which will basically do whatever we want it to do during our iteration of the loop. Then we have our end, which is the final statement. It's like adding a period. Python is different. If we want to go back to Python, we don't have to add an end. The colon signifies that end, and the spaces of that signify the end. Yeah. Java's a little different. If I wanted to pull up a Java IDE, do I want to pull up a Java IDE? No, I don't. It's too much work. But we would have to use a bracket to end our statement. Now let's go into the data types, because we talked about keywords, and I will link these keywords in the description of this video. But that's just one example of using keywords. We have for, in, do, end, just like the structure of a sentence. I kick the ball. I, me, the action, the object. You can think of this as for. Pretend the I is really for. The kicked is really do. For in, sorry. The I is for, the kicked is in, the ball is do. We have those structural words to complete the sentence, just like we have those structural keywords to complete the function. Okay. Then we have all these tokens which are reserved and cannot be used as special operators. For instance, we have the dots or the ellipsis. The ellipsis means the same exact thing as it does in English. It just signifies that there's going to be a large number of arguments being passed through a function, which we see the function keyword here to signify a function. The dot here, this is concatenation, which is with strings. I'll get into that. The reason I'm mentioning these words is because I want you to be prepared when I go over them. I'm priming y'all to understand that these words exist. You don't need to understand them, you just need to be ready to listen to understand them. Ask questions to yourself. That's the only way you'll learn how to develop in code. The colon here, in Lua, regular Lua, like there's no colon. We can't really use a colon in regular Lua. However, in Roblox Lua, we can use the colon for type specific or static typing. Regular Lua is dynamically typed. Roblox Lua is statically typed. Okay, let's get into data types. So the first one I'm going to go over is a number. So this is a number. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. It doesn't matter. It's just a number. We use local, which is our access modifier in this case. Our access modifier is localized to this script. It also depends on the stack or the current code block you're in. For instance, if you were to define a function, your local would be localized to that specific stack of that function. I will explain the concept of a stack later on in this series, but right now we just need to worry about local. At this current stage, simply just means it's localized to wherever it is defined. Number is our variable name. This can be anything. It could be A, B, C, D, whatever. I would just want to call it number, just because. The colon here, this has to be case sensitive. This is extremely case sensitive. We cannot just name it A. A doesn't exist. If we hover over it, it'll say, hey, I don't know what A is. So we have to use a built-in type or data type, followed by our equal sign, because if we don't define it, it'll just be nil, which is, remember, that's that keyword I mentioned. We have 100,000, whatever number that is. If we remove this, we will have a floating statement here. Notice it errors. It says expected identifier when parsing expression. We have a floating expression or a floating statement, which essentially means that this 100 can't be there. We have to define or attach it to something. So that's why we use our variable here with the equal sign. Now we have a variable called number that will be easily be able to be referenced by our number. So that's how you make a variable. Then we're going to make a string, right? A string is just a string of characters. Think of it as a bunch of characters pushed together. C#, Java, and C++ have a special data type called char, or character, which signifies one individual character. However, Lua only has one specific string type. It doesn't have characters separated. You can separate a string by using string.split, but there's no true character data type, but rather it's just a string. Then we have a Boolean. That's true or false. Notice it's a keyword. We can do false here. Or is also a keyword. Local is also a keyword, by the way. True or false are reserved for Booleans. We can also, in C++, however, the language allows for Boolean expressions to be 0 or 1. That also indicates, or what's the word? It also points towards binary. If you know binary, then you would know 1 means on, 0 means off. In that case of C++ and C, that 1 simply means yes, true, or on. 1, 0 simply means off, no, or false. It follows the same principles as digital logic and design in electrical engineering. But that's just essentially what Booleans are. It's just in memory, it would be notated by a 1 or a 0. But at the end of the day, if we really go down to the bare bones of this, everything would be notated by a 1 or a 0. It would just be expressed differently depending on the language. The higher the language, the higher level the language, the less binary you're going to use. For instance, C++, there's a lot of memory manipulation and binary string manipulation. It's ridiculous. You can also do bitwise operations in Lua, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to go over that because it's a little bit complicated. It is fun if you know what you're doing, but it's not needed. Okay, so then we have a nil value. Notice that keyword again. This means nothing. Nil, it just means blank. If we try to assign it to anything else, it'll actually tell us you can't do that. So we have to assign it to a nil. Then we have a table. This is brackets. Now a table is a data type, a type of data. Dictionaries and arrays are data structures. The difference between a data type and a data structure is a data structure is a collection of different data types. Let me say that again. For those in the back who didn't hear me. A data structure and a data type are different. A data type is one piece of data. A data structure is a structure or collection of multiple different data types, right? So in this case, we have a table. This is a data type. In Lua, there are two types of tables. There's dictionaries and arrays. We can go with an array, which in this case we would define it with a colon, followed by the type of data in which it will hold. Now we're just creating an array that is going to hold a series of numbers from 1 to 5. And then we can also have a dictionary. This will be defined like this. Right? Notice how dictionaries have key value pairs, whereas arrays have numerical value pairs. There is no keys in a dictionary. I mean, there's no keys in an array. There are keys in a dictionary. I'm pretty sure that made sense. Sorry about the pause. I'm used to teaching students, and there's usually a question at this point. I'm alone here in my room, so I was kind of shocked that there was nobody asking, what? What did you just say? Yeah. Alrighty then. So we have local keyword followed by the array, which is of course a data structure rather than a data type. We have a number here, which is the data type which the array is going to hold, and we have the series of numbers. Notice how an array is the data structure because it holds multiple types of data types. Notice how a dictionary is the data structure because it holds multiple types of data types. A table holds nothing, it's just a table. This is the data type. Then it changes once we assign values to it like this. However, in memory, or in Lua, it is all classified as the same data type. They all fall under the category of a table. Now to index the word index, that essentially just means we're going to index or get data from a table. You can think of that as just finding what is in that specific index or in that specific spot in memory in that table. I'm going to have a specific video specifically talking about dictionaries and arrays because to fully understand them, I'm going to go in depth into each data structure. But that will be later in this series. For this, we're just going to do a brief summary of how to index them. So to index the first index, we start at 1. This will get the first index. In other languages, let me rephrase that. In every other language in existence, except for Lua, the first index of the array starts at 0. However, Lua starts at 1. So we go from 1 to x, x being however many items are in the array. So in this case, we have 5 items in our array, so we can do array 5. This will print the first index, which is 1, and the last index, which is 5. Then we'll add another print statement here, our print function, to notice our ellipsis here, followed by our type. These are two of the reserved. This is a reserved special character, and this is reserved special character. Notice then we also have the colon here. But yeah. So then to get our dictionary, we do dict.ourKey and dict.ourKey. This will return the key which is assigned in our dictionary. That's how these work. They're just references in memory to a specific data type. You can also put variables inside of here. For instance, if you wanted to change that to number, you can. So the fifth index, instead of being 5, it'll actually be equal to this, a reference to this in memory. Again, I will explain what that means in a later video, but that is how we make variables in Lua. Those are also the basic primitive data types in Lua. And yeah, hope you all enjoyed. If you have any questions, DM me.